Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here, in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Paul Solomon.
I'm Pete Wissinger.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And today, it's the new hosts doing a little getting to know you episode for you, the listeners, where if you've been a listener of the show for a while, you know that Jake and Brendan did episodes where they kind of categorized their own taste to figure out what is a quintessential Jake game like and what is a quintessential Brendan game like. Well, today we're going to say, what's a Paul game and what's a Pete game?
Yeah, you get a little taste of our tastes. And if you've been listening to the show, you probably have some sense of that already, but you'll get a little bit of a deep dive into Pete and Paul today. First of all, I want to thank everybody that voted or nominated, I should say, for the Golden Geek Awards on Board Game Geek. It means a lot to us, and it actually really helps spread the show when people get our name up there on those lists. So thanks very much. And of course, thanks as always to anybody that has left a review.
Whoa, did we get a new review?
Is that sound again? I love when that happens so much. Thank you to whoever. Let's see. I'm going to pull it up right now. Oh, nice. Right here on Apple Podcasts, new review. This one, thank you from Skye Games. Really appreciate this. And this is a long one. Let's get into it. Title, Absolute Magic. To preface, I don't like podcasts, but people suggesting podcasts never wanted to hear that. They were so sure I'm the type of person who should enjoy this media, or a specific podcast would be the one trademark. For 15 years, I've tried this, that, and the other. But no matter how interesting the topic or talented the casters, the spoken word soon devolved to Charlie Brown teacher talk in my ears. Womp, 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 womp. I am writing this review because Decision Space Podcast is the one trademark. Start at the beginning with Jake and Brendan's What We Talk About episodes, and you will be enthralled with the topics they explore, the terms they define. Now take this shared language and jump into their game deep dives because you will find yourself enraptured with the conversations. Soon, you'll be considering the points they make and evaluating your preferences across many aspects of gameplay. Listening to Decision Space will level up your engagement with board games mentally and emotionally, and it's darn tooting entertaining. Heartfelt thanks to the creators, Jake and Brendan, for their time they dedicated to enrich this hobby. Special shout out to the new hosts, Paul and Pete, who are already proliferating the unique voice of the show while still exemplifying the lovingly curated spirit of Decision Space. The Discord is hopping. The YouTube uploads are fantastic, and there are years of weekly episodes ready to turn anyone who loves games into a Decision Space fan. 10 out of 10. You listen again and again.
Woo!
Wow, that's a big one.
That we got to put that on like the back of the box, right? I mean, like
For
that's
sure.
that's huge.
Right.
Skye Games. I assume you're on the Discord. I don't know what your handle is in our Discord, but thank you so much for that review.
Absolutely. My favorite part, right at the end here, special shout out to the new hosts, Paul and Pete. Oh, touched my soul. Thank you.
No doubt. And, it sounds like Skye Games maybe would enjoy getting to know these new hosts and what makes us tick as gamers.
This one will mean a lot to the community, I'm sure, and I'm excited about that. So why don't you tell the good folks, the listeners, how this is going to work a little bit, Pete?
Yeah. So we are going to use a similar structure to what was used on the Brendan Quintessential Games episode, where we're going to take a look at what our preferences are across a couple different metrics, but we're going to kind of do this a little bit almost like dating game show or something, kind of like newlywed game style, right? Where we're going to come up with a topic and I'm going to say what I think Paul would say. And then he's going to tell me if I'm right or not. And then we're going to kind of flip it back and forth and kind of do this little how well do we know each other and how well do we know ourselves kind of exercise.
Very nice, very nice. So we've prepared a list of games of our own that really, they're not necessarily our top games in our top 10, but they really are strong examples, quintessentially us games. And then also I've prepared a list of games, knowing my friend Pete, that I think match and exemplify what he loves in games. And we'll talk about a number of these things. Where do we begin, Pete?
Yeah, well, first, I want to just think about the idea of a quintessential game. Would you say that quintessential Paul game is not necessarily a game in your top 10, and that maybe there's games in your top 10 that are sort of exceptions to the rule that don't necessarily, clearly fall into your normal preferences.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I do think, first of all, yeah, that's true. Some of my top favorite games are there because they're such good exceptions to something probably that I usually dislike. Um, and I don't think I put it there in my top 10 anymore, but Diplomacy is a good example of this, where it's massively long in a way that I don't play, and it's extremely mean in a way that I don't do. But that has been such a cherished game for me. And that might make another episode for like good counter example games, you know?
Yeah, that would be an interesting one that maybe we should do with the other hosts down the line is what are games that on paper you should not like, but you
Yeah,
absolutely love? But we're
totally.
talking about
Do
the
you have
opposite.
those?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But we're going the opposite direction. We're saying, what are the games that seem like they were designed specifically for your tastes, right?
That's right, that's right, and
But
sometimes there are some on paper that I've looked at and I've thought, "I should love everything about this game," but they don't quite hit, and so these are the ones that really click and work and tick all the boxes, and they'll let you know what I'm all about.
yes. Okay. So, first, we're going to start with this scale that was used on the Brendan Quintessential Games episode. And I think that this scale was at least posted by one of our listeners on our Discord. I'm not sure if they made it, but it's a couple of different metrics and it's a scale of 1 to 4. And you've got properties on each end of the scale. So a 1 or a 4 would be the extreme ends, and then a 2 or a 3 shows like a light preference. And
Yeah.
so yeah, what do you think of this? You're a scale guy, right? Does the
Yeah,
scale
I'm a scale
make
guy. I
sense?
think I think, you know, the Solomon scale famously goes 1 to 3. I think this actually it probably is useful to have a little more resolution here, because we're not rating goodness. We're sort of like you get that classic, like, agree, strongly disagree, and I think that's actually when it comes to taste, that's probably, it's probably better in this case, you know? Where do we align on that 1 to 4 spectrum? I think that's pretty good. And we have really a bunch of these categories. Really, these are when you think back to that review. These are the sort of terms that Brennan and Jake have defined over time. And in just a moment here, we're going to dig in. We'll start with one of Pete's games, but enjoy this music.
All right. So the first one of these metrics for us to think about is clear to opaque decision space. So a 1 on this scale would mean I like crystal clear decisions that are, easy to understand so I can make the best decision possible. And a 4 on this would be an opaque game where you really on your turn kind of have very little idea of exactly what the impact of your decision will be.
Yeah,
And
and I
so
would say, yeah, that's exactly it. I'd say it's not just what is the decision, but like what is the long term implications of where that's headed, right?
So, Paul, I think on a scale of 1 being clear, 4 being opaque, that you are probably a 1. I think you like
Mm,
a clear decision space, maybe a 2, but I think that you prize in a game design something that's like clean. And I think
hmm.
that clean game design typically is pretty clear decision space.
I do agree. That is I was gonna put myself at a 2. I definitely like where I can understand the point values at play and that I can have a balanced system that is, like, communicated to me well as a player. But there's an element of depth here of, like, you know, chess, the decision making is clear insofar as you know exactly what the specific move is, but it's the depth that makes it somewhat opaque. And there are games that I like that sort of fall in that number 2 spot.
Yeah, one I was thinking of that I know you love is Arboretum because Arboretum is one where I think the first time you play it, it is insanely opaque. But once you're a couple of games of Arboretum in, it's actually crystal clear, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah,
just have
yeah.
to internalize that scoring mechanism.
Yeah, and that is a great example because you have to understand first of all, yeah, the scoring system, you have to know and be able to scan the table a little bit, like how deep in are they on Willow or whatever. But then you have to know really the spread of the deck 1 to 8 and how those are gonna play, and, um, I will say the opacity here is a 2 because as the game goes on, I get a clearer and clearer sense of what you have in your hand, which is essential. Is basically the main tension in the game is what's going to happen at the end of this thing. But in the mid game, I don't, and so there's like this lack of clarity as I pick up cards, and I know from myself where it's headed, but I may invest a lot of resource, turns, time into building up some color that I don't get to score at all. So I would call that a 2, and I think that's a good example. Um, but something like Barren Park is much more clear, and it's just a question of depth of how far am I going to be able to plan what the rest of this board is going to look like.
For
Yeah.
sure. You're definitely not a 3-4 on this, right?
No, I wouldn't say so. All right, so let me make a guess at you on this scale. Um, I think this is it's a little bit of a tough one for me to judge for you, but I would say that you're a 3, um, for slightly different reasons. It's not that you like the information to be hidden or like hard to discern, but it's that you like a little bit of chaos and unpredictability in your games, I would say.
I think you're definitely right. And I think that part of the reason I'm on the 3 or the 4 here, maybe even a 4, is that I prefer games where um, the game state is totally dependent upon all the players at the table. And that's going to,
Mhm.
by definition, be opaque, right? Like if by the time the turns whip back around to me, I'm not totally sure what the game state is going to be. So there's a lot of like bet hedging. Like I definitely prefer a game that is fuzzier, right?
Mhm.
Like I also, if it's a it's if a game is where it's whether or not there's a clear puzzle and the person who solves that puzzle better wins.
Mm.
That's just not something that I'm as interested in. So I want it to be a little bit more opaque, not just for me, but for everybody.
So let's just take a second and talk about arcs, which I know was your number one decision, your golden
Gold
decision
medal.
from 2020. Yes. Um, and as I think about that, I don't know. I maybe would put that at a 3. Again, like you're saying, I think that so much of what it's about and so much of what you like about it is what are these other people at the table going to do? And how well can I read? This is kind of what their board position looks like. So maybe they're going to play this so that that will score. And then how am I going to pivot on that? So you have like some predictability about how the other humans at the table will behave. But then also, in a very real sense, there's like you have no actual predictability. Humans have free will. They can do any kind of crazy nonsense they want.
Yeah, I think actually Arcs is a great example of opacity because even if I know what you want to do in that game, I don't know if you
Hmm.
actually have the cards in your hand to do it.
Right.
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 So
Yeah.
even if I do feel like I know how the round is going to go, I actually don't have any idea because the only thing I know is the cards in my hand. So yeah, that's a good example of, and to me, that's exciting, right? That's what makes games exciting to me.
Sure. Yeah. I think this is a great place to start because it shows how kind of opposite sides of a spectrum we are here. And yet we basically get together every Monday and play games and have a good time. Right. So,
Yeah.
diversity at your gaming table and preference, it's a good thing.
Well, that's what's funny is that I think that, well, I have a question, and this is kind of a little bit of a break, but which of us do you think is more of an omni gamer?
Um, I'd say you are more of an omni gamer. I mean, uh, yeah, my tastes are
There's certain
probably a little
types of
more
games
narrowly
that you,
defined.
right? There's certain types of games you just will always choose not to play.
Yeah, that's true. I will avoid them as much as I can, and if you bring them out at game night, I'll say, yeah, let's not do that.
Right.
Um, and as I look over at my collection, and I've been thinking about what to sell for Geekway, I look at a game like Leaf, and I go, this is pretty similar to this other game, and do I need them both? And am I going to
Yeah.
pull that one back out? So, yes, that is true.
All right.
All
Well,
right,
do you
let's
want to?
hit the next category.
We can kind of like snake draft this. So like you can start the next one, and then we'll go
Oh,
back and
great,
forth.
awesome. Let's go to I think multiplayer solitaire and interactive is another category here, with one being parallel play. I'm kind of on my own, thinking about my own puzzle, and then interactive, obviously, more kind of well, interaction between players. And there are lots of mechanisms that mix these different ways. There's positive player interaction, negative player interaction, direct player interaction. This came up a lot in your Mean Games episode. Um, Let me start with you. I think that you are a 4 on this scale. You want a highly interactive game.
I think that you are correct. I would also put myself at a 4. That's what for me, if I play a game I think is clever and it's like a 1 on that scale, I'll play it like once or twice and then I'm kind of done with it. But if I
Mm,
play a game that I think is good but it's high on that scale, I like crave playing it.
yeah. Are there like ones on that scale that you like? Is there anything that you can think of? One that comes to mind is Imperium, which I
Yeah,
think you mostly play as a solo game. Imperium
absolutely.
Legends, Imperium, whatever the other one is,
Yes.
and then the third one. And you play it mostly as a solo, but it is multiplayer. Have you played it multiplayer?
Yeah, I've played it at 2 only.
Yeah, yeah,
And for that one, the issue is mostly, game length,
yeah.
is the main issue. But yeah, it's not interactive, which is why I'm happier to play it at a low count. I mean, I also really like Dominion, which I would
Mhm.
say is low on that scale. So maybe there's something about certain mechanisms that are interesting enough to me that I'm willing to play a low interaction game over and over.
Yeah,
But like most of my favorite games are highly interactive. I mean,
for
I think in
sure.
any episode where I've gotten into my tastes on things and the whole mean game episode, I want much interaction as possible. I want the winner to have won because they actively stopped other players from winning, that
Mm,
sort of thing.
yeah, you like you like it to happen above the table, and you like table balance. Let's say,
Yes. Now,
yeah.
for you, I would say I don't think you're necessarily a 1 on here, but I would say you might be a 2.
I would say 2 for sure. Yeah. I was thinking about a game that is a good example of this, but I like something where there's some shared puzzle. It's often a drafting puzzle, some space in the middle of the table where we're interacting somehow, but then things come over to some little thing often that I'm building that I get control over, that I can plan for, etc. And the game I'm playing is one that we played recently with a Viking theme. Do you remember it?
Loot.
Loot with 3 O's. The logo looks like a long ship. Yeah, which super cool. It has this almost worker placement thing in the middle of the board where you're placing Vikings out to sort of claim neighboring spots and do some interactive board placement stuff there, like have a chain of your Vikings connect 2 towers, and then you get a bonus, or get an army of 4 to touch a castle, and then you take that castle. So there's this interactive play space, but then also every turn you take something and put it back on your own little private village board, and that's where actually basically I think all of the point scoring happens essentially, right? You get some points for what you do out there on the board, but you get a token that you bring back to your board to sort of amplify points, try to do this configuration puzzle um, really well,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
was I was thinking, when I think about a lot of the games that I know you like and even games that you design, um, you like some like a little bit of a fight to get things, but once
Yeah.
something is in your area, it's yours, right? Like
Yep.
if you don't like a game where someone can just like go over to your area and just take what you got, right? That's like
That is correct.
that's not you sort of you've joked that I like these games that
Yes.
let you like flip the board over, right? Like
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's not something you would value.
No.
It's not that you dislike interaction. It's just that if you've worked for something, you don't want someone else to easily be able to take that away.
Yeah, and it's actually not right. What you're saying is making me realize it's not a question of interaction. It's a question of progression. And I like sort of this monotonic forward progress game as opposed to one that can be chunked off. And here again, the counterexample is Arboretum, because you spend the whole game every turn adding a card to your Arboretum, but at the end of the game, the whole thing can kind of essentially be destroyed by somebody holding cards in their hand. The only difference is that that's just endgame. It still has this monotonic
Right.
progression forward until it stops.
If there was a rule in Arboretum that like you could like steal a random card from someone's hand, it would just ruin the whole game for
Yeah,
you. I mean, it
would
would
not be
also
fun for
ruin the
me.
game, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is, speaking of games that I design, like, Honey Buzz is a good example of this shared board space where there's a race to get nectar and, a race to sell things off to get points, and then there's this shared worker placement board to claim action tiles. But there's no way to, like, go over and knock somebody's stuff around, and so many of the play tests in, like, the first, I don't know, it was, like, 3 or 4 years of testing, people would always be like, "Oh, you should add these wasps that can, like, go over there and
yeah.
do their
Right.
stuff," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, thanks, I appreciate that feedback," you know? And I was
Yeah.
never in a million years gonna put that in.
All right. I'm going to move on to our next
Let's
metric.
do it. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one I've got here, I'm going to do tactical to strategic.
Mhm.
So just for listeners, tactical is sort of like a turn to turn kind of decision where you're kind of evaluating your best decision at that moment, whereas a strategic is about long term planning and executing over the course of a game a strategy. Does that
Mm.
understanding make sense to you, Paul?
It does make sense to me. I think there are places where it blurs at large,
Of
like,
course.
there's lots of games that just don't really have an overarching strategy to them. They have,
Correct.
like, a puzzle that you play. I think Brian Surrey has famously said that his games don't have, like, a lot of arc and strategy. They're sort of like, "This is what you're gonna do in the puzzle on this turn. This is the kinda thing you're gonna pull."
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of games have a mix of both, but if we're looking at what type of play you value most, you're definitely, I would say, on the tactical side. And I would probably put you at maybe a 2. I don't know that you're full. I want to totally it to be tactical. You don't want you like the progression, right? But
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think that you like having to make a long-term strategy at the beginning of a game. So I think I'd put you at a 2.
Yep, I think you've nailed it there, and, I I'm finding that I'm sort of middle of the road, but a little one way than the other, and you've helped me realize something here about the way in which I like strategy to be implemented, and I'm looking at our other list, seeing if this is gonna come somewhere else, but I don't. So, strategy, uh, a lot of games talk about strategy in terms of multiple paths to victory. Like, okay, this time I play Seven Wonders, I'm going to go for a science strategy or I'm going to do a military strategy. And it's sort of like you're in this balanced play space, at least in some theoretical level, and you're going to choose a path to sort of follow. And because you're on that path, it will ultimately dictate a lot of the tactics. And as you said, I love a game that has an arc and a shape to it and that feels different game to game. But here's kind of how I like it implemented. Um, I like a game that says, here is the objectives for this game. This is the setup this time. Everybody kind of try to play this strategy. And it shifts the way that the value structure works in the game. You kind of get what I'm saying? Can you guess at a game that's like that?
Um, I mean, like Stamp Swap is like that,
Stamp Swap is
right?
like that, right? And this was for a
Because
long
you
time
got the
my favorite.
scoring cards. Those scoring cards
Yes.
in Stamp Swap are going to give everyone strategic paths,
Right.
but you're going to put a different one out every time you play.
Yes, and they're gonna, the ones that I always think of are Isle of Skye, Cartographers, and these are Cartographers more is telling you a spatial puzzle, but Isle of Skye is dramatically changing the value of tiles in the game, and the game is all about asking you, like, how much is this tile worth to you or other players? And so it says, like, in this game, focus on the whiskey barrels, and focus on building your roads, and focus on sheep. And in a different game, those things don't matter at all. And I really like that. I really like that. It feels different every time, but it's still just sort of smaller turns.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a 2 or a 3, but um you're right, somewhere in the middle. Where would you
Yeah, but
where do you
the
stick
part of the
me
reason
on
I
this?
didn't go 3 is because I don't like heavier games. Although I don't know if this counts, but like in a game like Age of Innovation, I don't know if you would call it a strategy to say like here's this round. How many rounds are in Age of Innovation?
Right. There's 6 rounds. Right.
Right. So here's 17% of the game, and I have to really build a whole plan for this thing. I have a strategy for how this, again, that's sort of blurring the lines because
Mhm.
strategy is tactics on a larger scale. But
Yeah.
in general, I like to think a little smaller. For you, this is interesting. I think you're blurring these lines a little bit. I won't put you at a 4 for strategy. I think all of the trick taking games that you love so much are highly tactical. They're sort of like you look at your hand and you build a strategy for how I'm going to play that hand. Um, so I would put you at a 2 or 3, and I'm going to come down on the side of 3.
I think so. And actually, trick taking is something I thought of with this because I do really like bidding in trick taking games. And I think
Mm,
bidding is a strategic choice,
right,
which comes before a bunch of tactical choices, right? But it is obviously a long term planning thing. But I do think I'm probably a 3. I love Age of Innovation, which is, I think, a highly strategic game because usually at the beginning of a round of Age of Innovation, I'm looking at my resources and I'm like, okay, well, if they do this, I'm going to do this. Because ideally, I'm going to do this, this, and this. It's like totally planned out with a couple of
right,
different contingencies. I've mapped out the variables. And I think part of the reason I like deck building is I think deck building is strategic because I'm putting a card in my deck that I know I'm going to want later, right? I'm not going to use it right now. And
right.
so something like Dune Imperium, where at the end of a round, I'm going to add some cards to my deck. I'm thinking, okay, well, what do I still need to do to get points, right? Get those cards. Hopefully they pop up. I do like forward planning for
Yeah.
sure, but
And
not.
deck building too is sort of like this is where my deck is, and it's you can't easily pivot in a deck building game. So once you're in it, that becomes a strategy, and if you want to build synergies, you're kind of playing along those lines. It demands that you say like, and I think Dune Imperium, like you said, is a great example, a game we both love, where you know card strategies will follow and your player power too will say like you got to kind of play a spice game here, or they'll say you got to kind of align yourself with the Bene Gesserit and the spacing, whatever it's called, and because you have to climb these tracks and you have to play cards that are invested in them, and so you get very committed that way.
Yeah, I mean, I do like highly tactical games as well, but I think about also like my favorite Stonemeyer game is Scythe, and when you play Scythe, you get your special player board, which your top and bottom rows, and your faction, and you set up on the board, and you're thinking, okay, I have access to these resources. Okay, if I'm going to upgrade this action, and then I'm going to go hard on this, right? Like
Hmm.
it, obviously strategy involves tactical decision making and pivoting to enact that strategy, but especially in a heavy game, I don't want it to be purely tactical. Like the heavier the game, the more strategy needs to be rewarded. However, pivoting needs to be possible, right? Like I don't want a game where if I made some bad decisions in the first round, I'm screwed.
Yeah, so this actually, the some of what we're saying has me on like a different tangent that I don't even know. Looking at the list of categories, I don't even know if this falls in, but I'm going to bring it up. I know you love Race for the Galaxy, and I would say that's a fairly strategic game. It's got this randomness kind of getting in your way, but once you're building a tableau, and so that's naturally like a deck builder, it's naturally locking you into certain things. And it made me wonder about like engine building as a whole genre, if those are innately strategic or not.
Yeah, I think they might be, especially these sort of what you call deck digging games,
Mhm,
which would
mhm.
be these tableau engine.
Wingspan, Arc Nova,
Right.
Earth, yes.
And you call them deck digging games because once you start down a path in one of those games, what you're doing is digging for the cards that feed into that,
Yeah.
because the synergies are built into the card. Uh, what's
Deck,
in the
the
card,
world
the
of yeah,
pool, the
yeah.
card
It's a
pool is
question
on the
of am
board.
I gonna get what I need?
Exactly. And that's what
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
last episode talking about Far Away. Far Away is that, but condensed into the tightest package possible, right? Far
Yes.
Away is that in 15 minutes, which
Yeah.
makes it almost purely strategic game, actually. There's some, your tactical decisions are not going to make up for a strategy that doesn't pay
Mhm.
out. But because it's a 15-minute game, even someone who maybe doesn't like strategy is like, well, we could just kind of run it back, right? Try
Yeah.
it again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. All right, I got one for you here. This one is sort of on the board play and above the board play. And people also say like on the table or above the table. Um, a great example of this, I think, would be like diplomacy, as I said, which is a little bit of both, but primarily, almost entirely above the table and away from the table because you have to walk off
Yeah.
and chat with people in rooms in secret and double talk and all kinds of stuff. What's a great example of an on the table game?
I think we could say Wingspan is an on the table game, right?
Yes,
Like,
very much.
the if the table talk is not going to change me making whatever decision I was going to make.
That's right, and we can pretty much see what you're gonna do. I mean, chess is probably the classic on the table game, but these are games where, uh, personal expression maybe is not gonna show up as much, and it's just you're looking at what people have in front of them and not at their faces, let's say that.
Yeah, and so on this scale, a 1 is on the table and a 4 is above the table.
Okay, so this is real easy for me. I think there's a lot of games that you play that are on the table. I think a lot of the trick taking games end up on that table. But if I had to say quintessential Pete games, they're number four above the table. And I have a good example. You love Vadis, and
Oh,
Vadis is almost nothing on the table. It's all about the people and the table talk and who's going to screw over who and when and how can I convince them that they shouldn't work with that person. Uh, I think that's a good example of a quintessentially peak game because because it's so polarizing. But for you, it's like a win. It's an absolute win.
yep. I think you're right. Another example of this that I absolutely love is something like Skull. Which there's
Mm,
almost literally nothing on the table for Skull. Like, it is
correct.
all bluffing, staring someone in the eyes, or like a social
Yeah.
deduction game. Yes, I'm absolutely a 4 on this. These are the experiences that I get so excited about. I'll even try and create above the table play when I'm playing an on the table game.
Yeah.
Um, I like
What's a good
trash
example of that?
talking. I like, like if someone, if we're doing like a open drafting game and someone grabs the
Hmm.
thing I want, I will like audibly react. I will
Hmm.
I want I think that this is for me just like what makes games fun. Like,
Sure.
I think that part of being a fun person at the table is like reacting to things, right? Like
Yeah.
that this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just part of the fun of playing games, and
Right.
games that integrate that into the actual decision space of the game. Um, for example, there's sort of like, I think a good little kind of litmus test for your game preferences is, which Knizia auction game do you like better, Raw or Modern Art? Because I would say that Modern Art is almost totally above the table, whereas Raw is a little bit less. And so I think that yes, for 100%, I'm a 4 here.
All right. What are you going to put me on this thing?
Yeah, so that's interesting because you also enjoy playing games in the same way that I do, which is I think why we have fun playing games together, is because we do like, you know, joking, trash talking, this and that. And I did see you be absolutely savage in the one game of Zuvadis I played
I
with you,
did.
where
I
because
was
you were being
ruthless.
just to tell this story, because this is a podcast where Zuvada stories get told.
Yeah,
We were
that's right.
playing this game, and Paul had a couple of friends that were at the table that he was saying like, let's all basically be on a team and let's be
Yeah.
nice, and we'll just help each other get to the top. And it was
Right.
just this ridiculous, disgusting display the whole game of people just for free saying yes to each other. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And it got to the point to where Paul, everyone except one had made it to the top exhibit. And it
Yeah.
was like the last turn of the game. And our friend Richard, who was in Paul's little like, yeah, rah rah posse, was like, Paul, can I go in? And you just said, no, Richard, you can't. And you just like, you just
It's so
you
true.
could not get into the last exhibit because of your final betrayal.
Yeah.
And I think you just did it because it was funny, I
I can't
imagine.
remember.
Like,
I mean, I thought I don't remember if I won or whatever. I definitely remember that whole dynamic and story you just told. Um, but yeah, I think the diplomacy, game player in me had come out so strong where it's like diplomacy is all about like when will the backstab happen?
Right.
And games like this that say you can make any agreement but they're not binding are inviting you and telling you like this is what the game is about. And again, this goes back to your mean game thing. Like, was that mean of me? Well, or was that just sort of like the play space is inviting you to do that, and maybe your magic circle has agreed. Of course, the counter argument here is that I deliberately told him that our magic circle was, "I'm not gonna screw you over, bud. You can trust me, bud. I'm gonna be good."
Yeah,
We
yeah, yeah.
did. We spent all that time investing in our relationship, and I tore it right down. It's funny
Despite
because Richard's the nicest guy in the world too.
right. But
It
despite that absolutely like diabolical goblin kind of play,
Yeah.
I would say that you're definitely probably a 1 or a 2 here, but you do like a little bit more bite. You do like I know you enjoy a game like War of Whispers or Battle for Rokugan, so you're probably closer to a 2 here.
Yeah, I think 2 is probably good. I, and like you said, I like to have a lot of verbal fun while we play, but it doesn't end up being a part of the game.
Right.
Like I will talk about people's choices and have fun, but not as a way to like shape the gameplay,
Yes.
So the game doesn't occur above the table, but just the socializing.
All right. So next let's move to deterministic to randomness. So a
Mhm.
1 here is deterministic, which means essentially this is probably pretty close to the clear and opaque decision space, but I think deterministic would mean like I make a choice, so I know that this will happen. Whereas randomness is more I am making this choice and I know one of these 4 things will happen, right?
Yeah, and so this
Maybe
one does tie to what you just said about clarity, but I think it also ties a little bit to, and partly because the clarity can tie to, like, what other people are doing. So my first thought was, this is about, like, perfect information games, we sometimes
yes.
say, where, like, those are I know what everybody's gonna do. Now they're not exactly deterministic because I can't anticipate exactly what they're gonna do, right? Um, but a game like chess is, again, the sort of classic deterministic example. A computer identifies the best way to execute and does things. Although, on a more narrow scale, deterministic just means, can I even make this decision? And games that ask you to roll for result, like a Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah.
or whatever, a lot of dice rolling games are not deterministic in the same way. They're unpredictable and somewhat chaotic, and just randomness is the number 4 in this scale. So they're random.
Yeah. And so I think that you on this scale I have trouble. I've staked my places where I'm putting you at like the extremes, but I think there's another one where you're either a 2 or a 3, and I'm probably putting you at the 2 here. But just because I know that like a game that's like totally random is not one that you're gonna get into.
Yeah.
But also perfect information you also find boring. So I have trouble deciding if it's a 2 or a 3 here. So I'm gonna say a 2, but would concede if you think you're a 3.
I think 2 is right. And it's similar to what you said about interaction, which is I don't want something to get too much in my way. I want to be able to, at least at a minimum, understand the level of like variability and like randomness and probability. How likely am I to succeed? I think that's really important. There's also, when we talk about randomness, there's input randomness and output randomness,
Sure.
and I have way more tolerance for input randomness than output randomness. I think that's fun in general. And it goes back a little bit to what I said about variable setup. That's technically like an input randomness for strategy that we all play. But the other place that this shows up is like a game that is really random. Uh, if it has little to no mitigation factors, ends up feeling imbalanced in some sense. And it's not imbalanced in like a clinical sense, but it doesn't communicate to you that there's something well crafted that makes sense as a gameplay structure with point values that are good and dynamics that make sense. So yes, I'll agree that I'm a 2 there. I want to give the one counter example. a game that I love that I don't think people know much about, which is called Dice Heist. And there is another kind of alternate implementation called Snack Rabbits coming out soon. And this one is there's 4 cards in front, which are going to become lots of cards. And on your turn, you flip one out and it goes where it goes. So there's a little bit of input randomness there. And on your turn, you can either go to steal all the stuff in that space, which means rolling dice. So I can roll dice and try to beat a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5, or I can recruit an additional dice, which is sort of like a punt, and then other people get to take their turns. And when it comes back to me eventually, there'll be more stuff there, and I can decide how many of my recruited dice do I want to apply. It's a little bit like Elder Vale. How many of my recruited resources do I want to apply to this thing so that I can manage and mitigate that, because it's complete output randomness after I roll.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think that for you, I think you get excited by input randomness. I think you like being given an obstacle to overcome,
Yeah, I
or
think
you
that's right. I
like
like
being
being given a puzzle.
yeah, for sure.
They say, "Here's what you got to do. Let's see if you can do it." Yeah. Okay. For you here on deterministic or randomness, my first thought is that randomness does not bother you. Primarily, that arcs has randomness within it that doesn't bother you to a large extent. I'm trying to think of the other dice games that I know that you would play, but I can't think of a lot. I don't know if press your luck games are like super in your wheelhouse. I think I might
Yeah.
like press your luck more than you. Do I?
I don't know. I think it depends on the pressure. I think that that's actually an overlap for us.
Okay,
Um,
I think auctions and press your luck are a good overlap for us. I'm gonna put you at a 3. I think you'd be happy to sit down and play whatever. Just I'm trying to think of the goofiest dice chucker out there. I was gonna say
that
Yahtzee, but it's a great game.
like that Mino dice,
Yeah, Mino
right?
dice. Although that's a good example because Mino dice is am I right that it's wizard with
Dice.
dice for cards? Right. So this is all output randomness. And this one's so funny to me too, because it's like I have a gray. And following suit just means we all roll gray dice. It's just
Yeah,
very, very weird. But I know that that was not a big hit for you.
not really.
You would
However,
sit down and play it. I know that.
like my game that was on Kickstarter, Crits and Tricks, has a lot of
Right.
randomness in it, and
That's
so
true.
I think randomness is exciting. I don't mind output randomness if it leads to fun moments.
Hmm.
I don't think I would want a game to be totally random, but I definitely prefer. In general, if you said, would you prefer a game with randomness or a game with deterministic, everything? I would choose like all random to all deterministic. I think.
Yeah. This brings up another sort of dimension of this I want to talk about. But before I do, I just want to give you a shout out on Crits and Tricks, because the way it handles, for those that don't know, it is a trick taking game. The cards in your hand are suited but have no numbers. All of the numbers come from pre rolled RPG set of dice, essentially. And when you play a card, you play the card and select one of your dice. So first off, you have this nice input randomness puzzle that
Right.
sort of provides a strategy for the round, but also tactics in your quests and stuff. But the decision that I think is so excellent and is actually a counterpoint for me, because I love this part of the game, is when you play a die, you can roll it. And it gives you this sort of like, you give this predetermined, these are your dice, but then also like, you can always pivot and try this fun thing. And some of the best moments come from that. So
Yeah,
it's a
and
good example.
so I think that if you take, my favorite game, Root, battles in Root are a simple die roll. You roll 2 dice. The attacker gets the higher number, the defender gets the lower number. It is very random. Sometimes you get 2 zeros and you use your one attack on something that did nothing. And for a lot of people, or like, you know, playing arcs where you roll this big handful of dice and you shake
Hmm.
them up and you throw it and it's just terrible. Some people are like, "What the hell? It's so hard to take an action in this game." And like I worked so hard to like get myself in this position to roll this handful of dice and then it just was a wet fart. But for me, that is exciting. And so I actually don't mind the randomness there for sure.
Yep. Yep, that makes sense. So if I had to, I don't think I have even picked a number. Oh, yeah, I said 3, didn't I? You agree
Yeah, I
on
think
3?
I might put myself even at a 4, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Trying to look here. I think high search would be
This is our
our
last
search
one on here. And I had
on
to like
this.
kind of
Yeah.
think about what this one means.
Oh,
So this
okay.
is from high search to evaluative. And my
Yeah.
interpretation of this is that a high search game is a game in which you are looking at a lot of options and you're trying to look for the optimal path from looking at a huge array, whereas an evaluative is like you're given a simple important decision to make. Is that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think, a really classic example of a big wide search game is, 5 Tribes. It's perfect information, the game is right there, but the number of moves that you could make, if you bid and get the first turn is, like, astronomically huge because there's, I don't know, 25 different spaces you can grab from, and each of them, if they have 3 meeples, you've got, like, God knows there's 6 orders you could drop the meeples in. There's different paths you could take with those meeples, and so you have so many considerations to make as far as which one do I grab, which color am I going to drop where, what action is that going to let me take, and what of the things am I going to how am I going to execute that action. So that's like a really wide search and then also quite deep. Whereas a shallow one might be sushi go. I mean, light games in general are going to have
Yeah.
shallow decisions, but it just like, do I wanna take this 2-point, nigiri that's I know it's 2 points, or do I wanna take a sashimi, which I know is, 3 for 10 and nothing for anything else? That's pretty straightforward, less options, or even king domino is kinda like in between. There's 4 choices on the board, but where am I gonna put it? And the places I can put it are not that hard, it's fairly restrained. I'm gonna guess on you first here, and, I thought of this earlier. Just gonna put this out there. I think, in general, you don't like a game that is won or lost kind of based on someone's intellect or like experience with the game, which I think is part of what lends itself to the like randomness and personality and big swingy moments and the table balance. Because if we can all see that Brian's, he knows the game so well, look how well it's going, we can like counteract that. Um, Oddly enough, I think that's something I sort of share, and I think Brendan and Jake don't. I think that they like to be able to be the guy that really knows the game really well. Um,
Yeah, this is where we as new hosts have a little bit of a different way of looking at gameplay from sort of what Decision Space has been before us, because Brendan and Jake both love the idea of mastering a game where you're
mhm.
going to like study a game so that you can get better and better at that game. Whereas
And
I
I've
think that that's just not a motivation for us. I mean, I think
no,
that
not in
while
general.
we're playing a game, we want to do well, but my goal is not to be a top ELO ranked Feast for Odin player.
Yeah.
Like that just doesn't interest me at all.
Yeah, and there are counterexamples. Like I think Star Realms. This is I think maybe the first episode I came on for Decision Space. I talked about Star Realms, which was my number one game for a while. And this is a game where the skill ceiling is very high, but the where that outcome is in the game is very small. And so I spent a ton of time, I mean, ridiculous amount of time playing, and I did care about like being on the top 100 leaderboard all time. And I felt like I had huge levels of mastery. But in general, like this is what I don't like about chess. This is what I don't like about Go. I don't want to have to play a game where if I don't know what the cards are, I don't really have a shot. So
Yeah, I think what I think of as another kind of like slight difference in like high search versus a low search game is uh Dominion as the first deck builder. You get to look at all the options of what you can put in your deck the whole time. So you can
yeah.
sit there and stare at that kingdom market and kind of search out all the different combos and if I put this many of this and whatever. But I think a lot of modern deck builders have moved away from that high search to give you like a a market
A
row that
row.
is
Yeah.
changing, and you're only choosing between one of maybe 5 cards. So it's cutting down that search element.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so um, yeah, why don't you? Is it your turn to put me on a number here? What do you
Sure, I'll put
think?
you on one. So what I was going to say is, I think that high search games um, nudge towards skill games, where the person who kind of gets it better is going to do a better. Like, oh, you didn't see that move, like what? And there's also this like unpleasant moment where you all bid to take the first turn, and then you make the move, and everybody's like, what? Like,
Yeah,
what? You're an idiot. So I'm going to put you at a 3. I think a 3 is like a turn's got some good meat on it, and I think Haggis is a good example of this, where, like, the number of ways it might even be Haggis might even be a 2, but the number of
yeah,
ways to play out your hand is so high, and, but ultimately the decision of a turn is kinda small. It's sort of like, "I'm gonna do this," and once you have to meld match, it's quite small. Um, the thing about Haggis is, like, my brain absolutely melted. I locked up. I could
yeah.
not move at one point when we played. So yeah, I'd say 2 or 3, but maybe in general, let me think. Yeah, I think in general a 3. You wanna know what the rules of the game are. It tells you how to pop somebody and fight. It tells you how to build up a thing, and then it's up to you to do it.
Yeah, so I think what's funny is I think that I actually like high search games, but
Mm.
I play them like they're evaluative games. Like
Ah,
I like a lot of options, but I don't sit there and brain burn on it. So
yeah, that's a
I
good
think
point.
I think that yeah, probably I'm like I play 2 games like they're 3 games, I think is
Mhm,
probably where I'm at on this scale,
mhm.
because I do like having a lot of options,
Yeah,
but I don't like the, outcome of the game to be determined by who had the more optimal choices.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a good
Whereas
point. I have a similar feeling, but I'll answer it after you
I
kinda
actually think I'd put
reiterate.
you at like a 4, because when I think of quintessentially Paul games, I think that you love being given a clear simple choice with really bitey trade-offs. I think
Mm,
that you really, if I think of a quintessential Paul game, obviously you like a variety, but something where pick between these 3 things and you're like, "Ooh, I really want 2 of them," right? I think that that is
mhm.
the kind of thing that you really like in a game, rather than being like, "Hey, there's like 20 options to like pick a couple things or whatever." I don't
Yeah,
think that you like that.
that's a good point. So, yeah, I was gonna put myself at a 3, um, because the only reason is because tile laying is so often a wide
Mm,
search mechanism, because they're so, like, when you get a set of 3 Isle of Skye tiles and you're looking around at everybody's, maybe in a 4-player game, there's 12 tiles around the board, but then also I'm looking at my board and maybe there's 20 spots I could put that, and for each of those spaces, there's 4 rotations that I could put in it, and that's a puzzle that I really, 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 really like. I think Barren Park has a polyomino thing, which is, like, kind of high search, um, but you're right. I think what you're saying about the 4 is also that I just like clean mechanisms. And I like core tensions like in Coloretto, where it just says this. Do you want to add a card or do you want to claim a pile? And I think that's really that's a 4 decision right there,
for
right?
sure.
That's totally, what's out there and you know what you might flip and make the choice. I do. Um
Yeah, I actually think that when it comes to tile laying games, one thing I notice about a lot of these games when I play them with you is that getting the tiles is a low search part of the game, but placing the tiles is a high search part of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, certainly in Barren Park. Well, not maybe not Barren Park is the good example. Llama Land. I don't think you've played Llama Land, have you?
Mm-mm.
No, we should play that. But Llama Land, the tile acquisition choice is there's 5 tiles, pick one. And Cacao, very similar. Barren Park is different because it's tied to the placement of your stuff. But yeah, I think in general that's true. And I think Honey Buzz is a good example where it says here are the tiles are the same the whole game. There's 5 actions and 6 tiles. And it's just a question of, do I want to spend 2 Bs to get this one or not 2 Bs? 2 Bs or not 2 Bs? And that's the choice.
That's the
Um,
question.
that's the question. I Something you talked about playing 2s like they're 3s, and I think something that we have in common is we don't like to we like the game to move at a pretty good clip, and I don't like to sit there and ponder and make people wait for me, and I certainly don't want them to wait. I don't wanna have to wait for them, So, if a game presents me with 100 bajillion options, the thing where I get stuck is, like, I wanna understand what the game is. I wanna know, like, if I'm looking at Feast for Odin, which I haven't played, by the way, there's all these different actions, and they're kind of grouped in, um, categories of what
Yeah.
style of action they are, but, like, I wanna have this goes back to me saying, like, I wanna understand the scope and structure of a game, even just first time, in order to, like, play it at a reasonable rate, because
Yep.
otherwise I just get laughed off the table and it's not fun to make decisions that I just don't really get what it is or like what I'm supposed to be doing.
For sure. All right. So that is our kind of, and we were pretty good at knowing the other person, obviously, because we play a lot of games together.
And I'll say
Um,
I don't think there was except for maybe that last one where we both came in on a 3, or you said 2 playing 3. We really haven't had anything in common, I would say.
it's so funny. Yeah,
It really is.
it's miraculous that we enjoy playing games together so much.
It is, yeah.
But okay, so this next, we're moving out of that scale portion. Let's talk about ideal game length of a quintessential Paul and quintessential Pete game.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll start and say that I think that your sweet spot, I'm going to give you a range,
Yep, yep.
is a 30 to 45-minute game.
No
I,
question.
I think that
No
you
doubt about
have
it.
you have almost no interest in playing in general, right? If we're making
Right, right.
generalizations here,
Right, right,
and
right.
playing a game that takes over an hour to play.
If the box says 60 to 90, I'm almost never interested.
Right.
90
Yeah.
minutes to me is almost unimaginable. I think there are some that I will play at 90 minutes, but I lose interest and in general I don't like that length of a scale, and I don't know, I would kill for a 90-minute movie, but they don't happen anymore and it wears me out.
Yeah.
Is it the ADD? I don't know, but I like to know what the decisions are, play in that space, and then arrive at a resolution, and then let's play something else, And it's like when I go to a restaurant, like my brother does this all the time. When my brother goes to a restaurant, he buys like 100 dishes, but he won't eat any of them. But I look at that menu and I'm like dying because I want to eat all of them. I'll just like get 3 appetizers for my meal, which goes back to what we said about fillers.
Fillers, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think that if I told you, "Hey, there's this game that you played you thought was good but was too long," and someone made a version of it that plays in half the time, but
Oh
it's only
yeah.
got about 2/3 of the fun, you'd be like, "Great."
Oh yeah.
Right? Like,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
and I'm sure I wouldn't I for me, the 2/3 of the fun or whatever, that would be, like, better. I would have more fun. It would be, like, almost impossible, and I think there are good examples of that, especially in the area control realm. I've talked about this with El Grande. El Grande does big, exciting things, and I know it's well loved by a lot of people, 10 out of 10 from my friend Pete.
It's true.
Um but I'm sure I Battle for Rokugan, for example, is a game doing area control in a different way, very fast, that I love. So yes, I 30 to 45, absolutely. For you, you are so much of an omni gamer that it's a little harder to decide. A lot of the trick taking games are maybe they're 10-minute hands and you play a hand per player, and so you're looking at 20, 30 minutes. Um, but I think, if I said, "Hey, Pete, it's your birthday. We're gonna get together. You get to pick, man. What kind of thing?" And you'd be like, "Well, first of all, I want to play Root for at least 2 hours."
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right? I mean, how long is a game of Root when you
Well,
play it?
what the funny thing about Root, and I think this is true of a lot of my favorite games, is that, like, if you're playing with people who play them like me, you can play it in an hour. But if you're
Sure.
playing it with people who are prone at all to analysis paralysis, it takes literally double that time.
Yeah, yeah. And I have no patience for that. There's a guy I used to play with, a friend of Tommy's that I just said I'm never ever gonna play a game with this guy. First time I played Arboretum, I played with a player who just looked at their phone and talked to people and
Ooh,
like
that's a big no-no.
and we would get around and like we would say like, hey, like let's take a trip, and they wouldn't, and it was just like the fact that I at all ever played that game again is a miracle because the first play was horrific. I had such a bad time. Would you agree that like I would say if I had to pick an ideal game length, you're such a wide range, but I would say that if I picked quintessentially Pete games, it's going back to what you said on the filler episode. Like, there are some nights where you want to play 20-minute, 30-minute trick taking games all night, but it's not ultimately always satisfying. So I'm going to say that I think a 75 to 90-minute game is like top notch for you.
I was thinking like 90 is like my
Yeah,
sweet
90
spot,
was
but
the number I
like
had in my
that
head.
is
Yeah,
like the target for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Because I think if it's a game that someone would say, well, it's like a 90-minute game, but sometimes it takes 2 hours. I think that's probably close to the sorts of games that would be quintessentially Pete.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
bother me if it goes 2 hours, is the other thing.
Hmm.
And of course, I tolerate games that go 3 hours, but
Sure.
that's not the quintessential.
No, that's not.
Um,
That's not.
all right. Next, I think we could do like general something that you like and something that you dislike.
Yeah.
Maybe let's give each other one of these.
Okay. Um, so here's something of yours that I think you like. I kind of am gonna say two here, but they're sort of related. One, I wrote down historic dweeb stuff because you are
Yeah,
famously
yeah.
a medievalist. You're kind of a Cole Worley stan, and by kind of I mean definitely. And he publishes things like Molly House and whatever else he did. These historic games with whatever historic dweeb stuff. Um, but the other side of it is I think you like um, what I call inside baseball stuff, hipster stuff, which is like you want to know all those Japanese trick taking games and you want to have a language for that. And I think this podcast to some extent is always inside baseball talk as far as games are concerned. But I think that there is an aspect of you, there is a quintessentially Pete thing, which is that you like to know deep down inside baseball stuff about a genre.
I think calling me a hipster is probably accurate.
Oh yeah.
And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
maybe what you're getting at is like I like things that are weird and obscure.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that that is probably fair. That's less about the decisional qualities of the game, and that's maybe more to do with kind of the ephemera around a game. Um, but yeah, I think that that's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's true.
All right.
Cool. What about for me? What do
Something
you think?
I
Something I
think
like.
that you appreciate is, and this is just kind of like an obvious one, but I think you really appreciate clean math in your games. I think that's something that really sets you off is if you can like look at the various point values and being like, oh, that is so clever and smart. Because if you do this, it's a 2, but if you do this, it's
Oh yeah.
actually a 3. Like that's something that you just love.
I do. I really love that. And obviously being a mathematician, being a developer game designer, this is something that I put a lot of time and energy into thinking about. But just to give you an example, I think um, I'm really fascinated by the difference between something like so here's a good example. When you play Dragomino, the kids' version of King Domino, if you do the thing you're supposed to do, which is match colors, you get an egg. And an egg is worth 0 points or 1 point. And then you win by points. And then I just played Cascadia Junior, and in that game, when you do the thing you're supposed to do, which is get a group of 3 of something, you get a an animal. You get a whatever, a bear token or whatever, and the bear token is worth 1 to 2 points. And the difference between having a 0-1 game and a 1-2 game fascinates me. And Sushi Go, for example, is a 1-2-3 game. Imhotep is a 1-2-3 game, but when games are 2-3-4 games, they have totally different feels to me. And Star Realms is a 4-5-6 game. And I really think about those kind of things all the time. We had such a long night of development working on the point scale for the point ramp for the reindeer. on the advanced side of that
Uh-huh.
game where it goes from, you know, 1 reindeer up to 9 reindeer, and like, well, we want 9 reindeer to be 31 points, or we want it to be 25 points because that's Christmas or that's December. And the impact of those differentials and stuff, yes. Yes, sir, I do. I very much enjoy that.
All
Well
right. So
done.
now I'm
Well done.
now I'm going to give you a dislike and you can give me a dislike. And
Okay.
so I think something that you dislike is a game that asks you to jump through hoops to perform actions that are ultimately simple. You don't
Yes.
like being asked to do like a resource conversion puzzle.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And obviously, you know a lot of these things from our conversation, but yes, in general, this is part of why I don't like heavy games is because they say, "Here's a point structure. Build this thing." And you go, "Great, I'm gonna build that thing." And you go, "Well, hold on now. You're gonna need at least 3 wood. Okay, and the wood is over there, but it hasn't been chopped down yet. So you're gonna have to do this and then that." And it's like, "All right, fine." But like that's not a fun it's not a
Yeah.
fun, like, sometimes I call them resource filters. That's not a fun resource filter for me. That's a good
Yeah, I
example,
remember
yeah,
you saying that you don't like being like, okay, you get this resource to build this building to make this thing that's worth a point. You're like, that's
correct.
not your jam.
That's not
Yeah.
fun for me. And I another good example of this is, Seven Wonders, which on paper I think should be a game I love. It scales at player count well, it's got simple drafting choices, multiple paths to victory, kind of indirect player interaction, and some light direct player interaction. But the thing I hate about it, two things. One is to be kind of high level, you have to know the specific like tech tree of if you have this card, you can build that card, which to me is ridiculous. But then also, I have to think constantly about resource cost. Do I have the wood or the
Right.
gold or the
Yeah, yeah.
silk or the whatever? Do they have it? Can I pay? It's like, no, just let me take a card. And so, like, I would much rather play Sushi Go or a game like Paper Tales, which all those resource costs are just coins. And so it's just a question of, do I have coins or not? And do I want to pay coins for this thing?
Yeah, I'm thinking like you also we just the other night played FinSpan, which you
Yeah.
played the other two span games, but I think that
Yes.
FinSpan takes out a lot of the hoops that you have to jump through to and so FinSpan is sort of like Wingspan for Paul because it's Wingspan, but you get rid of all of the kind of like obstacles to just playing cards.
Yep. 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 I think that is very true. Well done. All right. So one that I think is a dislike for you, and we've talked about it a little bit. So let me think if I can think of another one. Um, I think the big turnoff for you is just parallel play, solo puzzle, zero interaction. And I think for all the scales that we talked about, this is the most important for you in terms of determining taste. Is if it's just trying to think of what's the best example of something like this. Probably a lot of roll and writes.
Yeah.
We almost never play roll and writes because they are almost exclusively shoegaze parallel play puzzles.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think that I can have fun with one of these games if it's, like, short and then we move on to something else. Um,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't want a whole night of the sort of, you know, more parallel play types of games. Um, that's just it's either gotta be short or we're playing it and moving on or something like that.
Yep.
For sure. And so I think a way to end it is we could maybe say games that we perceive to be a quintessential Paul game and a quintessential Pete game, and let's each give each other one, and then we can say one for ourselves,
Yep.
perhaps.
That sounds good. All right. I'll start with you. Um, I have 3 written down here. I think they're all good. Uh, I'm gonna say that I think modern art is a quintessential Pete game because the point values are pretty well, they're a little unclear because how players will act will determine what there's the most of, and you can kind of talk people into stuff and tell people that someone's got too many points from the first couple rounds and we have to do such and such. But then also there's a pretty elegant player interactive space, which is just auctions. and it allows you to think in both spaces about like, what does this cost? Is it worth it? Is it gonna be? And there's like calculations that you do, which is a place that we align. Um, but ultimately, it's a kind of a goofy, chaotic game as well.
100% modern art is a great choice. It is probably my favorite Reiner Knizia game, and I think
Mm,
that yeah, it is everything I want from an auction game, but with this ability to like sort of perform and
mm,
kind of be silly with each other.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's a great choice for me.
cool.
One that I would say for you is maybe Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which is I know a game you love, but I think that why this is a quintessential Paul game is the way that you lay the tiles is this very fun puzzle where um, you're kind of making plans, but you're kind of having to pivot, but you're saying, oh, if I connect this and this and close this room off, it's worth all these points, and that's just the kind of feeling you enjoy. But then also the pricing mechanism when you're the master builder plays into that kind of auction value judgment kind of element. You like looking at something that you're like, okay, I know Pete wants that. How much money does Pete have? Do I want him to be able to get it or not? I think that that's the type of interaction that excites you. And so I think this is that interactive picking and then solitaire placing that is like quintessentially Paul.
Oh, Pete, you know me so well. You know me so well. I have a piece of paper here. I wrote down my three, and the top one is the Castles of Mad King Ludwig. It is the
Yeah.
quintessential Paul game for all of the reasons you said. The simple question of what is this worth? What is it worth to me? What is it worth to them? Do they have the stairs, or can I make this downstairs room free because I can get it and they can't? What are the current game objectives in terms of, are we looking for big rooms or this type of room? What are my personal objectives from what I got in the I don't know, the utility rooms? And yes, that is a marvelous game. uh Great choice, well done.
Yeah.
Well, now that you've given that one to me, I'll have to choose a different for my own. Isle of Skye is the other one that does almost all of the things that I like
Sure.
as well. They're very, very close for me. um Another one that I'm gonna pick is My City. My City, for those that don't know, Reiner Knizia polyomino tile placement legacy game. Um, though the legacy components are kind of small, it's ultimately a campaign game. Really, what happens in this game is you play a very, very fast uh, tile placement game, bingo style tile placement game, where we all have the same tiles almost exclusively, and we flip a card and we all grab that tile and we place it. Um, the game takes maybe 15 minutes for folks like you and me that play quickly, but very soon after that, you read a little more and the rules change a little more. And so now there's a slightly different thing that you have to do. You have to race towards this, or you have to keep your colors together. And you have this kind of like shifting objectives game to game with a very tight loop on how long a game takes. And so, my game group, this really predates you, but my game group of me, Matt, and Tommy, I think we played our first night, we played like, I wanna say 9 scenarios, 9 games, and then the next time, I think we played 12, and then we played, like, another 9 and 9, because essentially they're grouped into, like, I don't remember how many there are, but they're grouped into chunks of 3, and so you can play a chunk of 3 in 45 minutes, and, yeah, I found it amazing, and here's the one thing that blew my mind is in the game, the polyominoes are, they're, I think they're dominoes, triominoes, tetrominoes, and I don't know if there's any pentominoes or not. There must be. But in the game, as soon as we started playing it, I thought, okay, so like later on in one of these envelopes, he's going to give us the little squares so we can plug holes. And I thought it was such a cool design choice that they never ever showed up.
They never showed up.
He never gave you the little squares, and I thought that was just really cool.
Awesome. I actually have played maybe a third of the way through that on Board Game Arena. So I have actually now played it because we played my
So you haven't played it essentially.
island, which I thought was kind of boring.
Yeah, I did
Um,
not like my island, and I threw it out.
yeah, but my city I have enjoyed on BGA.
Yeah,
So
very
here's
cool.
where for me for quintessential game, I think this is where it's funny because I think that what I'm going to pick is not one of my favorite games. Okay, so it's actually a Cole Whirly game, but it's my fourth favorite Cole Whirly game.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
and this is
give us the
Oath.
top 3 before. Okay, it's Oath.
Yeah, so so it's going to be Oath, and because I think Oath. What's funny is I think it most exemplifies your historical dweeb hipster nonsense
Yeah.
thing that you gave me.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at Oath on paper, it looks like a game designed for me because it's like, okay, so there's this kingdom that we're all a part of, and one person's the ruler, and everyone else is in exile, but you can become a citizen of, and then you and the ruler are kind of on a team, and you're like, each person has their own victory condition that you're trying to stop them from getting, and then we're telling the story of this history between times, and like it's like pop, 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 pop. It's like my brain is just like, oh my gosh, this was made exactly for me. I think that the only reason it's not higher up for me is that it's a little uh much. Like
Yeah.
the mechanisms of the game are so Byzantine that you really have to have a group of people who want to dedicate months of gameplay just to this game.
Mhm.
And that's just a big ask. And
Yeah.
so I think that it is probably very quintessentially me. Like if I were to list all the things I'm looking for in a game experience, Oath gives me all of that. And
Mhm.
some of those games, the endings of a game of Oath are some of the sort of most memorable, dramatic gaming experiences I've had, which of course, big, splashy, memorable moments is like Pete's number one favorite thing in
Yeah.
a game. And so I think that for me is going to be the quintessential Pete game.
Very good. Very good. Pete, have you ever played Feudum? I'm curious.
No, it looks like a game I want to play.
It does. It has the look of a game that you would like, and I would say something that you and I both like is fun art in games, and
For
I think
sure.
a lot of the modern art things have fun art, and I think Feudum has fun art, and
Yeah.
Castles of Mad King Ludwig has funny, titles for
Yeah.
the rooms and stuff. But anyway, that one certainly heavy and complicated, and I was just curious. So,
Yeah.
well, there you have it. I hope it was fun for all of you listeners, you decision knots out there, to get to know me and my good friend Peter here. What do we got coming up here, Pete, in the near future?
Well, I know that there's some talk of doing some top tens here in a bit. This is something that Jake and Brendan have done every year, but this will be the first time that Paul and I will be a part of the top 10 discussion. So, pretty
Very fun.
excited to get into that. People love a top 10 list, you know?
Awesome. And I will be putting together an episode soon about balancing for player count, the challenges that games put together for this. We know lots of games don't play well at 2 or don't ever play it at 5. And as a developer, I can tell you it's what I think is the most challenging thing about games. So that's coming up. Hey, if you like this thing, please write us a review. Apple Podcasts or Spotify or somewhere. Let the good people of the world know what you think of this. Good, bad, or ugly, and join us on the Discord. We're over there messing about. You can go to decisionspacepod.com, I think, to find the entry. Is that right, Pete?
I think so. And I also would like to hear if you're in the Discord when it comes to discuss this episode, say, are you more of a Pete or more of a Paul? Right?
Curious. Yeah.
I think that would be fun. And I also think that in this newlywed game, Paul, what's funny is that it proves opposites attract, right? Because
Yeah,
we do know each other well. And
for sure. And we would have crushed at Newlywed. I mean, we knew each
oh
other
my gosh.
extremely well, and
We
our tastes were very divergent.
we'd bring home all the
Beautiful.
money on the newlywed
Love
game for
that.
sure.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. And thanks always to Hembry for our intro outro song, Reach Out. Bye bye.
Bye everyone. Good stuff.